Welcome to this Facebook Live where I'm going to be talking about ME/CFS and creating new responses, activating the parasympathetic state or the healing response. So in order to support recovery from ME/CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia and long COVID and other related conditions, it's important to address the stressors that put the body in fight, flight, freeze response, if that's an issue for you, and practice new responses. So if you recognize that when you have energy, you tend to overdo it and crash, put a comment in the chat if that's you. That when you experience it, you tend not to be generating calm and tend to catastrophize. Or if you recognize that when you do physical activity, you tend to get anxious and get tense, then you may recognize that it's useful to cultivate new responses. And with practice, those responses can become our default response. And I give those three examples because those were things that I was doing very consistently when I had ME/CFS. So why is it important to create new responses? Well, if we don't create new responses, so Isabel says she gets angry. Yeah, I can relate to that. If we don't create new responses, then we can just repeat those patterns. That keeps the body in fight, flight, freeze, and it hinders recovery. The body is doing its best to heal. It's doing its best to do the important repair work, but that is hindered when we are in that state of fight, flight, freeze. And that can lead to frustrations. We don't see progress. We see ourselves just being caught up in those same patterns and loops. For instance, I would constantly get energy, overdo it, crash, or feel better, then forget about my kind of routines and overdo it, crash. And, I kept repeating that cycle. That did keep me stuck. But when we get it right, we're actually putting our physiology in the healing state. And in that state, the body can do repair work. This promotes healing, and it is possible you can start to see the benefits of that. So what is it that we need to do to actually create these new responses? Let's explore that. So I have, if you just joined us, put a hi in the chat. I have created a video called Neuroplasticity in Action, and I will add that to the guide section in my ME/CFS group. So if you're not a member of that group, do join that group. That video that I created, it contains information that I wish I had when I was dealing with ME/CFS. Joe's saying hi. Hi, Joe. So if we look at this slide here, imagine that little yellow ball is a signal that's traveling along a neuron. And it's very easy for that neuron to go down that red pathway, which in this case is the kind of stressed response, because those two neurons are very close together, and because they're both thick and fast, the neuron travels fast and travels quickly down that pathway. Because the gap's small, it's really easy to just continue down that pathway. And so actually creating a new response, actually shifting to a more useful response, takes a bit of conscious effort because the gap is bigger. But if we keep practicing that, interrupting that old pattern, and we talked about interrupting the patterns in the last Facebook Live, again, check the guide section to watch that video. But if we keep interrupting that pattern and practicing the new response that we want, something interesting happens. And I talk about this more in this video, which I will post to my group. The neurons start to move position. The unhelpful pathway starts to move away from the primary neuron, and the helpful response neuron moves closer. It becomes easier to do that response. And I talk as someone who has had the experience of being very good at generating stress and anxiety, and was quite neurotic when I realized I started learning these techniques. I thought I've got a lot of work to do, and I learned to become much calmer more consistently. So in the previous session, I talked about these elements of what's going on when we are faced with an event that's challenging. I talk about the equation. If you're not familiar with this, I talk about this equation, E plus R equals O, where E is the event, R is the response, and O is the outcome. Now, the response might be a physical sensation. Let's say, for instance, you notice a symptom in your body. Okay, that's a physical sensation. You then may have an emotional response to that physical sensation. And as I talked about in the last session, a lot of people aren't very good at just experiencing their sensations, the physical sensation, the emotion. What they tend to do, because they find it very challenging to stay with those sensations, is they create thoughts. They create story. Oh no, I've had this symptom again. How long is it going to last? Am I ever going to get well? We generate beliefs around those symptoms, and that leads to feelings. So feelings are a consequence of our thinking. Okay, so they're different to emotions, which are the body's kind of instantaneous response to a situation. And that can actually drive our behaviors. Let's say someone is feeling upset, they might binge on cake or chocolate or alcohol or whatever, okay? And often those behaviors kind of move us further away from our goals. How do we create new responses? Well, one strategy is to work on our behaviors. And some people say, oh, you can't work on the behavior, you have to work at the roots. But consider that, for instance, if someone's pattern is to overdo it when they've got energy, they could just set a timer. And by responding to that timer, deciding to have a break, and doing that repeatedly, they start to feel better. That starts to change their beliefs, that starts to change their feelings, that starts to change the way they think about the situation. So these things are related. Some people say, oh, we need to address the feelings, we need to change our state and shift from that unhelpful state to a more helpful state. That can be useful. I remember Brendan Burchard, who's supposed to be the #1 coach in the world, saying that it's easy to get people to change their state and get into a peak state, but sustaining that is more challenging, and therefore we need to make authentic shifts. Okay, that involves exploring what's going on in our mind. Okay, so an example of that, let's imagine you're driving along and someone cuts you up. You might notice you feel angry and stressed in that situation. Anyone ever done that? The cutting up or the angry and stressed? Now, you could reframe the way you look at that situation. You could make the mistake of thinking that is about you, their behavior is about you. Or you can say, actually, that their behavior is about them. It's about the state that they're in. I know what it's like to be stressed, and it's not very nice. I know we do rash things when we're stressed, but it's not about me. Maybe they're just having a bad time. Okay? And if we think about that scenario of lying in bed with symptoms, it might be easy to kind of go to the worst case scenario. Okay? So if the event is you're experiencing a bit of a dip and you've got 3 choices. You can respond in a negative way, in a neutral way, or in a positive way. Okay, so let me put that to you as a question. How could you respond to being in a dip in a neutral way or a positive way? What's your thoughts about that? I have shared some ideas about that in the past. But if that's the event, we can either go in this direction, or in this direction. Whatever we practice, we get good at. Isabel says, easy to lose patience. Okay, so consider that. How often is that your default response to symptoms, being in a bit of a dip, okay? Is it possible to actually respond in a calm, relaxed way to being in a bit of a dip? The example I've given before is that when I had ME/CFS, I did go and have cognitive behavioural therapy, and the therapist asked me what is something I'd like to do. I said I'd love to go clubbing, but I can't because I've got ME/CFS. And she said, what if you rested for 2 days and then spent the whole day resting and then go out for a few hours in the evening? And that's what I did, and I had such a great time that even though I was pretty tired for a week afterwards, I had a big smile on my face because I was just thinking about what a great time I'd had. Okay, so like to consider that there are, we tend to exclude possibilities and focus on one scenario. Okay, what's your thoughts about, to what degree do you recognize that your habitual response when you're in a dip is to just generate those feelings of frustration, annoyance, anxiety? Is this going to go on forever? Am I going to get well? To what degree can you relate to that? Certainly that's something that I did. Okay, so another strategy is to work on our beliefs by working backwards from behavior, feelings, identify our thinking. We can actually identify our beliefs and shift our beliefs. So an example of that, a story I have told in the past, see a few people have joined, so hi, do feel free to say hello. So I've told this story before. A friend of mine, she was going on holiday with her husband, and they got to the airport, and the taxi driver opened the boot, and there was only one suitcase in the boot, and it was her husband's. And she said in the past, she would have, in that moment, been threatening her husband with divorce. But in that split second, she kind of shifted her feelings, her thoughts, and her beliefs. She decided that when she got to the airport, she'd buy some toiletries. When she got to the resort, she'd buy an outfit for the evening. And because obviously she couldn't wear the same thing as she was traveling in, could she, ladies? And she'd buy some swimsuits, and her husband could pay. And so she kind of changed the belief from this has ruined my holiday to actually this is a bit of a blip, and I'm not going to let it spoil my holiday. It's still possible for me to enjoy my holiday, and this is my strategy. So she changed her feelings, she changed her thinking, she changed her beliefs. Okay, and then one of the ways we can create new responses is by practicing, experiencing our sensations without creating thoughts, beliefs, feelings, and behaviors. Okay, so if I'm feeling upset, I could binge on chocolate, or I could just notice that upset and sit with it. And what happens when we do that is we stop creating thought, beliefs, feelings, behaviors. So instead of all that noise, we're just experiencing those sensations. Now that does take practice because we're not trained to do this. We don't learn, most of us haven't been taught how to do this as children, sit with our emotions. Some parents don't feel comfortable with emotions, so they don't teach their children how to sit with upset or disappointment. But as you can see, that's a very different scenario to all that noise. Okay, and when we do that, we're shifting from being in the sensation, in the thought, in the feeling, in the behavior, becoming aware that we're generating those responses at some level, and then we can become the observer. And in becoming the observer, we access the parasympathetic state because we start to detach from the experience. Okay, so this is a superpower. Okay, and as I say, some people believe that you have to address the behaviors. Some people say you have to address the beliefs. Some people say you have to sit with the sensation, and there might be times when each of those is appropriate. So, you know, I've talked in about 15 minutes or so about quite a lot of stuff. And, you know, when I'm working with people, we spend out, you know, like when I delivered the Calm course recently, we spent about 12 hours exploring all those areas. And when I train people more intensively, we spend 30 hours plus on all that stuff. So if you would like sort of help with that, you know, do get in touch. We can have a free session, tell you more about how I work, and you can decide whether it's for you. If you'd like one of those, put the words chat in the below. Do tag me so I get notified, or send me a message and I will send you a link where you can book a time. Any questions on anything we've talked about so far? Covered a lot of ground. What resonates? What patterns do you notice as I've been talking? To what degree do you experience sensation, whether it's a physical sensation or an emotion, upset, sadness, and how good are you at just sitting with that emotion and letting it pass, because they do pass? Or to what degree do you tend to go to your mind, create lots of thought? Feel free to put a comment in the chat if you want. Otherwise, we can finish with a very brief relaxation. So just let me know if you'd like. Tend to escape them, says Isabel. Okay, I'd be curious how you do that. So feel free to put a message in the chat if you want or not. But if you'd like to end with a very brief relaxation, then just put a yes in the chat and we'll do that. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is just make yourself comfortable. And as long as it's safe for you to do so, to close your eyes. Obviously, don't close your eyes if you're in any situation where it wouldn't be sensible to do so. I'd like you just to become aware of the position of your hands and arms, your feet and legs. And you can adjust your posture whenever you choose. I'd like you just to bring your awareness to your environment, to what you'd see if your eyes were open. The colours, the textures, the shapes. Just have a sense of what you'd see if you were looking round. And now bring your awareness to any sounds that you can hear other than the sound of my voice. And other than that background music or soundtrack. You may notice sounds that are close by, or sounds in the distance. And you can just let those sounds wash over you. You don't need to pay attention to them. As you bring your attention to your physical body, I'd like you to consider that there have probably been times when you're really just comfortable experiencing the sensations in your body. I'd like you to consider the emotions that you experience, a bit like the artist's palette. The artist's painting wouldn't be as rich in colour without that full range of colour. And in the same way, having that range of emotions gives us opportunities, gives the artist the opportunity to choose from that range of colour. Our ability to experience emotions gives us opportunities to make sense of our experience in ways that can be enlightening, healing, and can help us grow. So I'd like you to consider that it is possible to notice those sensations that we're experiencing. And as long as it feels safe for us to do so, stay with those sensations. And sometimes if we do create thoughts, feelings, beliefs, behaviours, we can process our experience so that we can open up different possibilities for the future and respond in new, resourceful ways. By practicing those new responses, they can become more familiar to us. And we can use them as a resource. What I'd like you to do now is just allow that to filter through your conscious mind into your unconscious mind so you can learn whatever you need to learn from this experience. So you can use it to move forward in your life, making the changes you choose to make. And I don't know whether you'll notice those changes consciously or unconsciously to begin with. I'd really be interested to hear what changes you make by practicing responses that you know will serve you better. As I say, if you'd like to watch the video about neuroplasticity, do join my Facebook group. If you'd like to have a free chat, if you know you need some help in this area, then get in touch. If you're watching on YouTube, do like and subscribe to be notified of more content. And if you found this video, do share with anyone who might find it helpful. For now, I'll say thanks for watching and bye for now.